When I was struggling, there's no way that I could ever imagined having the life that I have now. If you want a takeaway, kebab, a pizza, a curry, or a taxi, you go on an app and you find what's available, and you'll have a look at what options you've got and choose what you want for you. And so what I wanted to do is make that same simple, easy concept and put that into mental health services. It's now got over 9,500 services on there.
Now then, welcome to Reconnect, the podcast for people who want to heal and grow from life's toughest times. I'm Joe Tudor, the founder of the Reconnect Club and a mental health keynote speaker. Today, I'm chatting with Jake Mills, founder of the national charity Chasing the Stigma and the creator of the incredible Hub of Hope, which is the UK's largest directory of mental health support. We'll be talking about how to start looking for support, finding help that's right for you, and why we need to move past the generic mental health advice. Right, here's Jake.
If anyone's listening to this and they've not been on the website and they don't know what the Hub of Hope is, how would you describe it?
In the simplest form, it is one place to find all mental health support of all different types and kinds. So the easiest way to describe it is like we can get on a train, we can travel anywhere in the country, even if you've never been there before. And generally, if you want a takeaway, kebab, a pizza, a curry, or a taxi, you go on an app and you find what's available. And you'll have a look at what options you've got and choose what you want for you. And so what I wanted to do is make that same simple, easy concept and put that into mental health services. So you can be anywhere in the country, you can type in a city, a town, a postcode, or nothing at all, just press find nearby services. And ideally, the Hub of Hope would then use your location to pinpoint the nearest local support to you, as well as national support as well. But what we wanted to do is to highlight all the incredible support that's out there, not just NHS services, but really importantly, community support, voluntary sector, private, just like peer support groups, organisations that might not be constituted, but they meet once a week on a Saturday for a walk and talk, for example. You know, they're so important to actually keeping people well and giving people help and support when they need it. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to package it all up into one free app and website, and just constantly build the Hub of Hope. You know, it started from nothing, and it's now got over 9,500 services on there. And depending when this goes out, I'd like to think it'll at least be 10,000 by the time this goes out, and it constantly grows by the day. And all we're trying to do is just make finding help and support as easy as possible, because I know from my experience that if there's a barrier that gets in the way, you'll just stop. If you don't need excuses to not look, to not give yourself a chance when you're feeling low and as bad as I did. So we just want to take away all those barriers to say, it doesn't matter how old you are, what you're going through, whether it's young people or older people, right the way through, just go there, and that can be the gateway to recovery and finding the help and support that you need.
I think it's amazing. I keep saying the word amazing, but it truly is. I did a large piece of research. I didn't tell you this before, but I did quite a large piece of research. Over 1,000 people kindly filled in my online survey. And I asked quite a few open questions, and one of which was, what would help you the most right now? And the most common answer by some way was, I don't know. So I completely agree with what you've said. And I think from my experience, a lot of people listening to this will agree, because it's really confusing. You don't know what help you want. And that's why I think the Hub of Hope is a brilliant idea.
I genuinely believe, and I'll put this out here as a disclaimer, is that I don't in any way, shape or form consider myself an expert in mental health. I'm not somebody who's studied mental health and gone to university. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I'm somebody with lived experience. But I fundamentally believe that we need a whole change in our education around mental health, and we need really clear access to and pathways to care, to know how we get better, because we don't. But it's a bit chicken and egg. because unless we are being educated about our mental health, unless we're being educated about good mental health and bad mental health and all the signs and the symptoms and everything that comes in between, all the things that lead us to becoming unwell, then how can we expect anybody to know? Because we can't. I know when I was struggling with my mental health, I thought the way that I was feeling, everybody else felt, and that they were better at dealing with it than I was. I didn't know anything about mental health and poor mental health. I didn't know signs, I didn't know symptoms, I didn't know that I could get help, that it was something that I could get help for. I had no understanding. And so that's why I do think that, I think we're falling short with campaigns about just talking, and, it's important to talk about your mental health. Of course it is, but people don't necessarily know what it even means. And then if somebody does talk about it, does the person who's listening know what to do then, how to access the help and support? So I feel like we're literally only just scratching the surface and actually what we need to do. And there's so much that comes down to that education.
I've experienced that firsthand when you open up to someone and they just don't really know what to do. But I've heard your story. And one thing I'm really passionate about on this podcast is I didn't want it to be just another podcast where I try and chase after celeb to tell the story. I think we've passed that stage now. What you used the analogy of looking for a kebab. I'm guessing you weren't looking for a kebab when you had the idea of the Hubba Hope, or maybe you were.
Perfect.
Could you share your journey and what led you to start such an amazing website?
Yeah.
Or sorry, website is an injustice, a whole organisation, a national organisation.
Yeah, so as I said, I started to struggle with my mental health and knew nothing about it. Didn't know signs, symptoms, what to do, where to go, how to speak. It was not something that I learned about at school or in any jobs. It was not something I talked about with family, friends, anybody. I just didn't know anything about it. And so I thought it was a me problem. And I thought, it's a me problem, I'll sort it. I don't need to ask for help from anybody else. And even when people started to notice things about me not maybe being myself, I felt like a burden to them, because I thought, well, it's not something you can help with, so stop trying to help me, because I have to fix it myself. Long story short, that led to a suicide attempt 10 years ago. And that's something I ever thought I'd reach that point. I was getting CBT. I didn't really give myself up to that process. I felt like when I left those sessions, I was wrapping it all back up. Don't tell anyone I was going to those sessions. Don't tell anyone anything that you discussed. It felt, all of it was such a lonely journey that I kind of put on myself. And so I lied to everybody in my life, and I lied to the counsellor as well. And so I was discharged. And so I just had no idea about any help and support. I just thought it was you just have to learn to live like this. After that suicide attempt, I decided to speak publicly about what I'd gone through. And I'm happy to say, and be truthful, it wasn't to help anyone. It was only to help myself. It was to say, I need to own this. I need to move on. I need to reclaim that part of my life and build on it. I can't lie anymore. I can't have any more secrets. And after speaking about what I'd gone through just on social media, people started to come to me saying, I feel the same way. And I was like, okay. And then newspapers started to come to me, first locally in Liverpool, and then national newspapers. Around the same time that Robin Williams took his own life, and because I was a stand-up comedian, the media started coming to me saying, can you share your story? And I was being asked to go on television, and radio, and primetime television, breakfast television, and all these different things. And stories were being shared by like Emma Watson and James Corden, going to millions and millions of people. And I had no idea what to do with any of this. But every single time anybody heard me on an interview, anytime I'd done an interview, people came to me asking me for help. And I had no idea what to do. It was people very, very vulnerable. People asking about themselves, asking about loved ones, saying that they were in crisis. And I thought, well, I need to be able to do something with this, because just talking about it was giving people confidence and encouraging people to reach out. And there's nothing special about me or unique about me. It was the opposite. People were seeing me talk about something that they felt. So I realised that there was a power with lived experience in giving people that encouragement and trust. But I needed to do something more about it. So I wanted to, first of all, create an organisation. So that's why we created Chasing the Stigma as a charity, which is a national mental health charity. But then it was about, well, how can I take this person who's in distress and get them to help and support? And something that you said about you can Google it, but you don't even get the answers. And yeah, you know, I do. It might sound flippant to use the find the kebab, but it's very, very simple. I can go on it and I can look what's available. It should be the exact same thing, because we can be born and bred and raised and live our entire life in a city or a town and not know about the mental health support that's around us. So that's why I wanted to make that concept. So I put out appeal, and just on social media said, if you offer any support, tell me who you are, and I will build it into a list. And that list started to grow from 10 to 50 to 100. And then I thought, well, why should people have to come to me to be able to find this list? And why can't we make it available for people? And so that's why we decided to create a website and an app and make the Hub of Hope accessible to absolutely everyone.
You said there's nothing special and unique about yourself, and I couldn't disagree more. And the reason why I did want to make a podcast where people just share the stories is that I'm so frustrated with not just the whole media, but with the light we give to celebrities. And it tends to follow a similar narrative where celeb speaks out, they get loads of attention, and yeah, and great, because they are struggling, but then they don't really offer anything. It's, here's my problem. And I found it was one of the big reasons for wanting to start Reconnect in this podcast. When I was at my lowest point, I didn't want to hear a celeb share their pain. I wanted to get solutions, and that's what I think, why I disagree and think you are special and you are unique, because you've used that really challenging experience to create something. You've offered the bit that celebs have missed off. It's like, here's my story, here's what I've been through, but here's what you can do. And that's the bit that I think is often missing. Here's what you can do.
Yeah, I agree that. I agree about that being a huge missing piece. You know, you look at campaigns that are on TV and on radio and all that. And there was one that ITV done one, and it was like, take a minute for mental health or something, and during the adverts of like Ant and Death, they stop for a minute and they go, oh, it's a minute to think about your mental health. And after that minute, just goes back to Ant and Death, and you're like, what happened? What happened? What happened in that minute? Like, first of all, it takes more than a minute, but let's take that concept. But what happened in that time? If somebody did talk, if somebody did say, I'm struggling, generally as a population, we don't know what to do with that. And so there's got to be more to it. And I think you're right in the sense that, yeah, it's really important that people do feel able to talk about this publicly, and particularly with celebrities. You know, that does mean that we can reach more people and more people can hear that story. But we need to do more so that once people feel encouraged by hearing it, then what's the next step? It's and honest to God, that was one of the reasons why I did what I done, because I was being asked to go on television. I was on radio. I was still really vulnerable. I was still like building my life back together. I was 23 at the time, and TV was bad enough. Radio was even worse. But you go on, you do this story. Let's talk about what you've gone through. Really, personal and hard and stuff that you told me. You felt really vulnerable. And then you'd leave, and then you get in the car to go home or on the train, and then the messages come flooding in. And radio was even worse, because on radio, I always remember being on the Jeremy Vine show, and he said, gonna next, the way that Jeremy Vine does it, and he says, okay, next we're going to hear from a young comedian from Liverpool, Jake Mills, who actually attempted to take his own life. And we'll hear from Jake straight after Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars. I remember,
No way.
was sat there and I was in the car on my phone listening to Uptown Funk, and then he came back down and then we through that, and he talked about this and then goes, okay, that's great, and then you go, and you know, it's other times you might be in the studio remotely and the producer would just say, that's great, thanks so much, and put the phone down and you're left on your own. And there's nothing else that follows that. And that's why I've always been, you know, we've created a charity here. And that, first of all, that's why I wanted to create a charity and do something with it, because I was like, it's not just good enough me going out, talking and then leaving and then doing it again. Like, there's something that's helping people, but we need to do more, and that's what the more is. But that's also why, as a charity, I've always been really, really reluctant to. We get a lot of people saying, "Oh, can you get in touch with people to ask them to come and do an interview, or you know, anyone who's used a Hub of Hope, can you put out an appeal and ask them to do this for TV?" And I've always been so reluctant of it, and I've always felt like a responsibility as an outsider, seeing people being used like that as well. And there's been numerous times over the years when I've seen people talking about the struggles that they've had, being asked to do media reports. And I've often reached out to them to say, are you okay? Because I know how vulnerable you can be through doing that. And so, as I said, with the Hub of Hope in particular, and with Chasing the Stigma, the reason it came about wasn't because of my suicide attempt. The reason it came about was because speaking publicly like that, I realised there was a huge gap in actually doing something with it. And that's why we wanted to harness the power of lived experience, because I think it's a really important thing to harness, but to do something with it. Right, you've heard this, it's provoked something within you, you feel the courage and encouragement to speak out. Now what? And that's the point that you're making, and that's why the now what was going, and here is all the help and support that's available. You've got organisations that people will hear of, like Samaritans and Mind and Calm and Papyrus, who do amazing work, but we've got 9,500 services. There's so much more. So if you do look at any of them and think, that's not for me, that's okay, because there's others, and that's what we want to give people, options, and know that there's always different types of support. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
And that is such an important point. So as someone that had been through it, you've been through it, and you probably have better visibility as to what's on offer in this country, more so than anyone. So if I'm listening to this and I am stuck on a waiting list, it's not a dig at the NHS, but it's just the world we find ourselves in. I'm stuck in a waiting list, or I've maybe used up all my free therapy sessions, and I'm thinking, now what? What could those people find themselves in that situation do?
Yeah, no, and it's not a dig at NHS, but it's a reality, and we have a massively underfunded mental health services within the NHS. And so we do have a situation where thresholds are very high. People are being deemed not ill enough, where waiting lists can be very high as well, particularly in children and young person services as well. And you look back at my own kind of experience of, you know, I was going to that CBT, and I was thinking I wasn't giving myself up for it. And in the week in between, I was covering up, not sharing. Well, it's talking about options. So even if you are receiving help and support like I was, I could go somewhere in between. I could speak to other people. I could go to other groups. I could phone numbers. I could text numbers. I could go and play in a mental health football league. I could do whatever. All of these options, I could still get that help and support. If you're going to, say, a doctor and getting medication, great. That's a good thing to do. However, you don't have to just take medication and just sit and wait on a waiting list or not. You can access other help and support. You can see the support that's available. If you're on a waiting list, go and get help and support elsewhere whilst you're waiting. You don't have to just sit and wait. Everyone deserves to be well. Everyone deserves to have options and give themselves the options. And some things will work, some things won't. But find out for yourself. And that's why I always argue with the Hub of Hope is that the Hub of Hope is not just about accessing the help and support. It's not just about getting the actual support services yourself. It's about knowing that they're there. I think sometimes just knowing of what's available is as important as if you did access the support itself, because knowing the options allows you to go, okay, I know what I've got available, and I can maybe assess myself to say, do I want to reach that yet, or do I want to wait, or when's the right time? So that's why we say with the Hub of Hope in particular, it's about having it when you're well, and not just waiting until somebody is unwell. Absolutely everybody, we want everybody to have the Hub of Hope on the phone, so that if during that advert break in answering deck, someone says, actually I'm struggling, you've got it. You can say, well, actually, do you know the help and support that's available? So it's always giving people those options, no matter if you're on a waiting list, if you're receiving help and support, or if you've not reached out at all yet. Have a look at all the options that you've got.
Yeah, I'm really glad you ran through the options. And medication's one thing that and if anyone has got questions about medication, we've done I've recorded a podcast with Beverly Thompson, who's written an amazing book called Antidepressed that helps people understand and make an informed choice. So one thing I'm really passionate about is we act like in this country, but maybe in others, that it's therapy or medication. They're the only two ways to go. And my stance, and the stance I think of the podcast and Reconnect, is we give people the information, but let them make an informed decision if that's right for them. Therapy as well, you mentioned it, that I've done another podcast with an amazing therapist, Byron McInnes, who runs through the different types, but they're not the only things that's available. And that's, where would you be at Hub of Hope? I don't know where you'd find these things. So what kind of organisations do you have listed on the Hub of Hope?
Yeah, first of all, on that point as well that you made, I 100% thought I only had two options. One was therapy and one was medication. And when I got discharged from the counselling, that because I'd lied and pretended I was well, I thought, well, that's it. You don't have any other options. It's just the medication. That's it. And it all comes back down to that education. We can't blame anybody for feeling and thinking that if we're not educating people of actually the options that they have. On the Hub of Hope, as I said, it's about having all the options. So we will have NHS services on there. We will have private support that's on there, so paid for. We believe that you give people the information, allow them to make a decision. If some people are fortunate enough to be able to afford paid for support, then give them the information. Voluntary sector, I'm very, very passionate about charities in the voluntary sector. I believe that those grassroots organisations, they hold the key to trust of the community. It's sometimes going into a clinical setting and going to a GP or into a hospital, for example, puts people off massively. When actually, if there's people that they see every day in a community centre down the road, much more likely to go in there, have a cup of tea, and then see what's going on. So I'm really, really passionate about that. And I said it's about those other groups that maybe walk and talk. As I said, there's football support, there's art therapy, there's music therapy, there's all these different types of support that we just want to bring together in one place and let people see all the options and then find what they feel is right for them. And that can be alongside medication, it can be alongside statutory services, or it can be instead. It's all about giving people the options, ideally at an earlier stage, to find preventable and in preventative support to stop them getting to that crisis point.
You very well said something I bang on about on the podcast all the time in a better way than I do, so thank you. I see the importance of a toolkit. I'm not the only one to talk about the toolkit, but I see there being two. The toolkit's the broader sense, but I see there being two categories within the toolkit. One toolkit is about understanding. How do I make sense of the issues that the way I'm feeling? How do I understand that and learn to make meaning from it and tell myself the stories to what's happened? The second part is the toolkit is very much about, well, what can I do to grow from this? I've got this experience, I've understood it. The second part is, what can I do to grow from it? And the difficulty with the mainstream narrative being that it's antidepressants or therapy is that you need a really broad toolkit. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be different for everyone. So my personal toolkit, I find that exercise, running, community, just having coffees with friends, hanging around with cool people, that gives me a sense of well-being in the purest sense of the word. but that's not going to fix my problem. You know, you think about the reason why a lot of people experience feelings of depression. Going for a run isn't going to fix that, but it might make you feel better in that moment of time to deal with it. So it's really cool how you've outlined all the different organisations, because what might work for one person might not work for another.
Exactly.
Whilst I've got this opportunity and I'm sat with you, I'd like to share a little bit about my experience and ask a follow-up question on it. I moved back to the UK from Australia, and at this point, I was a few years into my own journey. I'd spoken to several different therapists and I tried support groups. So I was pretty confident in using services. I went on the Hub of Hope, typed my postcode in, and up came an organisation called Peer Talk. And again, I want to make a little side note, and maybe I'll look at the camera. This makes it really dramatic. I've not taken money from Peer Talk either. I just think they're brilliant. So I emailed them, and the most... I struggle to words to describe how amazing Rosa is. Emailed me back straight away and said, Joe, yeah, we'd love to have you come to our group. I was still really nervous, and I was lucky that Rosa was sort of there to greet me and welcome me in, and then instantly I felt part of the group. How common is that experience in terms of going on Hub of Hope and reaching out, and then that I found sport great, but do you hear, is that something you hear often now, people being quite nervous in going?
It's actually something that was raised this week. Speaking to a group this week, and somebody asked the question about, well, how do you go from seeing the help and support to accessing the help and support? And it's always going to be a big thing. You know, there's certain things that we have considered through the Hub of Hope to try and help that, because, you know, I can speak from personal experience. Generally in life, if I go into a room and I don't know anybody, I'll be like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. Like, what if it's a pull door and I push it? You know, those type of things. I think, oh my God, I'm going to make a fool of myself all the time. So what we've tried to do with the Hub of Hope is to try and give people as much information as possible. To, you know, the reason why we have like Street View on there was, again, for those reasons, is that, well, where is it? What does it look like? What does the building look like? Try and work out the door based on the Street View. You know, all these different things is what we've tried to do to make it feel like you've got all the information that you need before you then go and access it. And similarly, you know, we've had conversations with organisations who say, well, particularly NHS services, who say, well, you need a referral to access this service. And I say, well, let's just tell people that, you know, let's put it on the Hub of Hope, and let's be very clear that you need a referral and how you can get a referral to access that help and support, rather than not putting it on there at all. Let's make it really, really clear for people to know the process to access that help and support, to try and make and bridge that gap between seeing it and accessing it. So there'll always be ways that we can look at. You know, we've had the Hub of Hope live now for 5.5 years. We've grown massively as an organisation, particularly over the last 2.5-3 years. And we just want to improve it. We just want to make it better than ever before. And all of that user journey and that user experience is going to be key now, because when we created the Hub of Hope, it was simply, it was calculated guesswork. You know, we created something, we spoke to people, we used our experience, other people's experience, and we tried to create something. Now we want to build on that. We want to hear from people. We want to know how people use it. What are those things, and try and make it as user friendly as it possibly can be to try and bridge gaps like that.
Can I say, if people are listening to this, can I send you an email, especially not just areas of improvement, but also if you've had a good journey on Hub of Hope, I think send Jake an email.
Yeah, honestly, we would love to hear it. It's obviously, as I say, it's not something that we probably don't do enough to try and make it easier for people to be able to do that and collect that. But it's really crucial as well in terms of even funding and, you know, anything like that. It makes a massive difference. But for us, for the team, for people that we've got here who often can get lost in the day-to-day of finding services, adding services, looking at analytics, doing the training, all these different things, it makes such a difference. I remember, I'll tell you an example, I'd done a park run a couple of weeks ago, and I had a Hub of Hope t-shirt on, and I was running, and I felt awful, to be honest, because I'd had a night out the night before. And I was running, there's two women behind me, and one woman said, "Oh, have you seen that?" and started explaining what the Hub of Hope was to a friend who she was running with. And the other woman said, "Oh, do you know what, that's a bit of a sign for me to go on that."
Wow.
And I obviously didn't say that, and I just carried on. But I was like, that gave me such a boost to go, remember why we are doing it, and to tell the team here, never, ever, ever forget why we do what we do. And we always try to remind people of that every single day, every week. But sometimes hearing it from other people to say this made a difference, it means a lot to keep everyone going, because it can be really hard, and we can just get lost in the day-to-day.
I'd like to encourage people to do a couple of things. One, if you've used Hub of Hope, send Jake and the team an email. It'd be a really nice thing to do. Secondly, going back to the couple of points we made about the range of organisations on there in the toolkit, I found that some of the tools in my toolkit I'd have thought would be a bit not me at the start. So, for example, I love yoga, and I was not the kind of bloke that you'd expect to be doing yoga beforehand, but it's one of my most powerful tools now. One thing I'd like to encourage people to do is, if you're in the stage that both of us have been at, where you sat there, you might be on a waiting list, you don't know what to do, and you look on the Hub of Hope, try stuff. We know it's hard. We know you sometimes have to take a deep breath and you might be anxious, but just go and try these services. Even if you go once or twice and think, maybe that's not for me, what you'll find from my own experience is that eventually you'll start to build up your own toolkit, and you'll plug into community, and you'll meet people that understand, that get it. I think that's one of the biggest things that can help a person.
Yeah. What I'd say to anyone is that give yourself a chance. We all deserve a chance. Give yourself a chance. Try it and see. It's not a one-size-fits-all. If that doesn't work, at least you tried it. At least you know you can go somewhere else and find what might work for you.
So you're national. Does that cover most areas within, is it the UK or is it England?
Yeah, so we're a national mental health charity, so we're registered across England and Wales, but the Hub of Hope goes beyond. But that's what we're trying to do, is trying to cover everywhere: England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, trying to get everywhere that we can.
Amazing. So I suppose if people are listening to this, which sounds like you'll cover most postcodes, but if there are any you aren't, I suppose, what would your advice be?
The difficulty that we have is that we're a small charity from the ground, and yet we've got 9,500, 10,000 services on there. But we know that there's a lot more as well. So we depend on local knowledge and trying to work in partnerships with NHS trusts, with community groups, and trying to populate it as much. What I would say is, if you have a look in the Hub of Hope and you say there's nothing near me in my postcode, tell us. We will go and find them. We will go and find them. And you made a point before as well about having that list. Right now, we are the only people in the country, including government, including NHS, including Department of Health. Out of everyone, we are the only people who have a map of mental health provision across the country, because we have all different sectors through NHS and charities and private and community groups. Now, that's only based on what we've been able to collate, and we absolutely grow that day by day. But we can see what mental health provision looks like across the country. We can literally map it based on the areas. And that information is crucial to understanding, where the problematic areas, where the areas of high suicide rates, where areas of people going to GP looking for help and support. What does the provision look like? Is it there? And then we can use data of the Hub of Hope as well. It's completely anonymised tool. We don't ask for any information from anybody, but we can use that to see how people look for help and support and where.
What I think is amazing about you, Jake, is that you've gone through hell. You've had, you've been so much pain, really intense experience of depression, yet you've turned that around. You've had an idea and built something which I think is genius, and I mean that in the fullest sense of the word genius. It's something the country needs. Being where you are now, how do you reflect back on those experiences of depression and how it's impacted your life?
In all honesty, I have a lot of black spots in my memory. I don't know if that's a defensive thing. Sometimes my girlfriend at the time is now my wife, and she will maybe mention some things, and I cannot remember that. Like being somewhere or going somewhere or seeing something, or just literally cannot remember it. So there's a lot of black spots in my memory, and that might be a protective thing, and that's fine. I look back at how I felt and how I behaved and how others around me must have been worried. And I'm really sad about how unprepared I was for life, really. And it's not just me. So many people are going through something that's really, really natural to go through, all feeling like they're completely alien. Nobody else has ever felt like this before, and with no sense of what to do and how they could ever be themselves again. I've got a life now with my wife and my 2 children that was and is my absolute dream to have. And when I was struggling, there's no way that I could ever imagined having the life that I have now. And that's what makes me sad, is that I very, very nearly could not have had it. And I just feel like if we do nothing else, we need to harness that experience, not to be ashamed of it, not to hide it away, not to think of it as something dirty that we're not allowed to talk about. We put that front and center, not just mine, other people connected with the organisation and people that we work with, put it front and center, and use that to catapult us and to use it as a springboard to say, we're going to make a difference. And as a charity, that's what we want to do, is that we want to say, we are people, we're ordinary people, we'll talk as people, we will look like people, we won't use jargon, clinical language, we won't patronise, and we won't separate people. We want this to be a conversation for everybody, so that we can use our experiences to hopefully prevent other people going through their own.
I think that's amazing, and it's that hope. It's hearing that if the people listening to this in a really dark place and they don't know what to do, you've done it the hard way, but you've built the life you never thought you'd have. You've gained that hope. And if I could encourage people to do one thing, if you are in that situation where you're sat at home and you don't know what to do and you don't know where to get the help you want, please, please, please go on the Hub of Hope, and we'll put links in the bio. Everything you'll need is there. But I think I'm so happy that you did tell your story, Jake, because it's given me hope, and it gives hopefully our listeners hope.
Yeah, you're definitely not paying me.
You come to pay me, that's how advertising and bullshit works. So thank you very much. It's been so nice to meet you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, you've stayed until the end, so you're basically part of our community now, and I need your help. I've paid for the whole of season 1 myself, and I'm running on fumes now. I'm trying to raise 1,200 quid to cover the cost of season 2. Every penny will go towards creating episodes that help people who are feeling lost and alone. If you found this episode helpful and you're able to chip in, then please do help us to help others. You can donate towards season 2 by heading to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the show notes alongside some other resources. If you're in London and you want to join our Reconnect waiting list, go to reconnect.club, or if you'd like me to speak at your organisation, it's joetudor.com. Thank you for your help in growing the Reconnect community. Until next time, see you.